My name is Rob Avis, and my husband and I run Verge Permaculture and Adaptive Habitat. This is a extended three-season passive solar greenhouse in our backyard, basically in Calgary, Alberta. And I use this greenhouse to supplement and nearly supply our family in greens and tomatoes and cucumbers and really just things we like to eat for about 8 to 9 months out of the year. The greenhouse provides more than just a space for growing food in the shoulder season. So, I mean, in addition to extending how much food we can grow, it's just a great overall place to hang out, especially in the spring and in the fall. Greenhouse growing, however, I've found is far more challenging than gardening outside. And I suppose in a lot of ways it's the burden of the intervener. You know, the second we try and replicate ecosystems inside of an enclosed environment, we're taking away the functions that nature would have otherwise performed. So take something as simple as wind and pollination and bees that happens quite easily in an outdoor garden. The moment you bring all that gardening inside, it's one more thing you have to think about, ensuring that you get pollination, or some plants like tomatoes really benefit from wind just in terms of how vigorous and strong they grow. So I definitely find that the greenhouse growing is more intensive and requires a lot more input of my time and energy. Not necessarily has to be this way in a greenhouse, but our greenhouse is also on a concrete pad, so we garden in raised container beds. And again, I find it more challenging and more effort to keep healthy soils in that scenario where we're not connected to the subsoils. Compared to gardening outside, I definitely find that there's more considerations and more challenges and probably more effort that has to go into greenhouse gardening just to keep it as healthy and as productive as you would outside. And really those extra effort and those challenges are a result of the fact that this is a man-made environment and we've removed some of the ecosystem functions. So for instance, where wind would normally really help you pollinate plants, in a greenhouse you might not get the same kind of wind. Or bees, to do pollination, you might be doing more hand pollinating or doing things to attract the bees into your greenhouse. Pests can be a bigger issue as well and more complicated. In an indoor greenhouse, again, you might not have the predators, you might not have quite the same ability to attract in the ladybugs that are going to help you manage your aphids, for instance. Also, in our greenhouse, we garden in raised containers, and that's just because our greenhouse is located on a concrete pad. That adds, again, more challenges in terms of maintaining soil fertility as compared to gardening outside where I have access to subsoils and I've got worms and all sorts of, that natural soil ecosystem is there. The benefits are numerous, though, and for me, they're well worth the extra effort. I get to, I have this incredible sun space, just even for hanging out in the spring and in the fall. For sure, that in of itself is hugely valuable. But really, it gives me a huge head start on my outdoor garden, and I have tons of space to start seeds. I don't need to use artificial lighting like I might if I was trying to start a lot of my tomatoes and other plants in the house. I get to really maximize productivity in this small urban lot, in that in March, where the ground is still frozen and there'd be no way I could be growing anything out there. In here, I'm easily germinating a lot of leafy greens and the kind of food that, or the kind of crops that can still germinate and still grow with coldish temperatures. So we can get a full crop of some leafy greens in March and April before my tomatoes are coming into this greenhouse in May. And so there's more opportunity to, in a sense, stack the cropping and the productivity and ultimately get way higher yields from the space. So greenhouse space is very valuable when you think about what it cost us to put this structure up. And so when I'm planning out my planting and my spacing, the things that I'm thinking about is how valuable is that crop? Would it do fine outside? And also there's some, the taller plants go towards the back of the greenhouse and the shorter plants go towards the front. I've got vining plants and plants that grow tall, as well as plants that stay low, and even root crops. I even have at the bottom here beets and carrots growing. So I really am trying to stack a lot of production into that small space, thinking of both not only time, but also this idea of the different vertical levels. I've got, so for instance, the tomatoes, which are quite small right now, but they will hit the top of the greenhouse, and I've even got them on these strings that I can lower down. So towards the end of August, I'll be lowering them down, and they'll actually kind of dip over the edge here, the vines, and then keep climbing up. Tomatoes at the back, they're kind of some of the biggest as well. I do grow some fun squashes, delicata. I usually grow a buttercup in here, they're beautiful plants, and the greenery, the buttercup will start at one end of the greenhouse, and it'll cross the whole greenhouse and go back again by the end of the summer. I've got cucumbers and peas, which is an interesting crop in the greenhouse at this time of year. It's really, they do well in the cold, but I grow them in here because the kids just absolutely love peas. And that's part of it too for me, is growing things that my family loves to eat, and especially my children, that can pull them in and engage them and get them interested in growing food. I also grow a cover crop in these beds, so a living mulch, and I just use chickweed. It really volunteered. It's considered, it's called chickweed. It is often considered a weed. But a little known fact is that it is incredibly delicious and incredibly nutritious. So not only back to stacking in time and space and vertically, I'm also trying to stack functions for the plants that I choose. So this plant is a cover crop, which is going to reduce soil evaporation. It's going to prevent or create better soil conditions. And it also produces a yield, which is a nutritious and delicious crop. That's chickweed. The way I'm currently managing this greenhouse is in the spring, I'm not heating it, not adding any extra heat, although we do have the capacity to heat it. It's just a question of managing my human resources and how much time I want to put into it. So in around March, maybe even end of February, I start to sprinkle some seed in here. And I would do a lot of leafy greens and cold hardy vegetables. So good examples of that would be mache or miner's lettuce, kale, maybe even some chard would germinate, and some winter lettuces as well. And those is, if the weather's half decent, if we have a couple really nice sunny days and I come out here and water, will germinate. And within 6 to 8 weeks, I definitely will be starting to harvest microgreens, small little lettuces, and within 10 weeks we'll be enjoying nice crops of kale and chard and lettuce and the such, and eating salads out of the greenhouse. So this greenhouse does particularly well, and it can keep us fully, can keep our family of 5 for sure 1-2 salads a day. During those times, we can eat out of the greenhouse. And then as the season progresses and the tomatoes are starting to get quite big, the ones that I have in the house, getting too big for my small little grow light setup, those will start to move into this greenhouse. And also, I can't do it too early because I'm not heating the greenhouse. So on cold nights, it'll still get quite cold in here. So you have to kind of watch and see what's happening. But as soon as they're able to, I get them in here, and we'll basically tear out or harvest the kale and lettuce crops to put in my tomatoes, and leave a few in. You can see, I'll give you a tour afterwards where we'll actually look through the plants, but there are a few lettuces still left. Some of those quick growing crops like lettuce, I'm continuously sowing those. Every couple weeks I'm starting more lettuce to replace the lettuce that we're taking out. So yes, I've definitely moved into, I'd say, my summer crops now, where mostly cucumbers, tomatoes, eggplant, some really warm season squashes, winter squashes, and melons. I've got melons, and basil is mostly so what I've got growing in here right now. Whenever, people come over to our place and see our yard and get a tour of the greenhouse, and I show them around, I'm surprised how often one of the first responses I get from folks is, wow, that looks like a lot of work. And I've been pondering that more recently, this, wow, that looks like a lot of work. And the question I've been asking myself is, when someone pulls out a guitar and plays an incredible song, nobody looks at that person and says, wow, that was a lot of work. They just recognize it for a skill, an interest that person has in something, an art form that they can share. And I honestly view this as a skill in a lot of ways, no different than learning to play a guitar or learning to play a sport or to swim really well or to do something else. It's just like anything else. It's a skill, and it takes some time, it takes some effort. You'll have to learn. You might find yourself a mentor, you might find a teacher, you might pick up some books. And yes, you do have to put some time into getting good at that skill. But it's definitely not work, right? For me, at least anyways. You find those things that you're passionate about, especially when I see the benefits that come out of it. It's not only just an art form where I can invest time and energy and get this incredible productivity and have this beautiful space, but I'm feeding my family the absolute healthiest food that I could possibly feed them. And that comes with incredible satisfaction. So yes, it can be daunting, especially when you first get started, but I encourage it. It is an incredibly satisfying skill, hobby, art form, pastime. And you just have to start, just like anything else, and start learning. In terms of starting, I think growing outside in a garden is easiest, and just starting with some seed one year. And that's how I started. The first year I started gardening was just outside in the backyard, and we planted seed. And then the next year, based on my success, you want to build on successes, right? So you also don't want to take on too much too fast beyond your skill level. So then the next year I started some seedlings inside under grow light, because it quickly gets expensive to buy seedlings. You'll what's the expression? You'll burn the hole in your pocketbook, basically, buying $5 seedlings, where seed is so expensive. And then every year progressively, this is my 6th year gardening, which really isn't that much time. You get one crack at it every season. Some other tricks I have for ramping up your skills quickly is keeping a really great garden journal. I think that's so crucial, both for the outdoor garden and your greenhouse. And make notes when you start stuff. What does well, what doesn't do well, what are the issues you're seeing, what's happening throughout the course of the year, because you really do need to learn as much as possible in every season to ramp your skills up quickly. Good gardeners are logistical experts. Like it really is a thing of logistics and scheduling more than anything else. This last year, where back to like adding complexity every year slowly, I developed quite a comprehensive schedule for my garden and greenhouse over Christmas. That's kind of the little project I worked on, and it's an Excel spreadsheet that I'm an engineer, so it's an Excel spreadsheet, and I almost macro enabled it. That's just the way I am. And it's really helped me to increase my productivity quite exponentially from last year. But it's not necessary. Again, back to maybe the guitar analogy, you're not going to start playing a really complicated song when you first get started, nor should you try. Right. Overall, I'm incredibly thrilled that we have this space, and that, I have the opportunity to use it to practice an art form, growing food, and feed my family. I just think it's so incredibly worthwhile.